Hello, Year Six. Um, just thought I'd talk to you a little bit about your first project when you come back as Year Seven. So hopefully September time. But even if we're not all back here at the same time in September, we'll still be doing the same project. It might just take a little bit longer. Now, if you've got any uh, older brothers or sisters or friends who are in Year Seven, then you will have seen the clock project. One of the projects that I've set you is to look into the group of designers called the Memphis Group. And they were a bunch of designers that felt that a lot of things that you see in people's houses are really, really boring and they need a bit of jazzing up, maybe brighter colours. So I have set you a little exercise there to find out more about the Memphis Design Group. And then when you come to make your clock needs to look like it was designed by the Memphis Design Group. Okay, so it's something a little bit brighter, it uses brighter colors and a range of shapes. You get the clock mechanism. Okay, that takes an AA battery. You get the hands on the front there. The base is made out of pine wood, but the main part of the clock is made out of this plastic that we call acrylic. So acrylic comes in all sorts of different colours that you can use. I'll tell you what colours are available. But I want to talk to you a bit about plastic so that you've got some kind of knowledge before you come back in September about exactly the sort of materials that we're going to use for this project. I have talked to you about plastics a little bit, but it'd be interesting to see how much you do know, and then maybe at home, if you've got access to the internet or if you can talk to other people, maybe you can find out a little bit more about plastics, where they come from, what they're used for. I'm going to show you some examples, and then maybe have a look around where you live in your home. See if you can find the different kinds of plastics that we're about to talk about. All right, see if you can identify them. You may or may not know that plastics come from the main ingredient would be oil. So if you've ever seen plastic burning, this is why it does tend to burn very, very well. But yes, the main ingredients of most plastics would be the oil that we drill out of the ground. Now, obviously, oil is not going to last forever. So I'm going to show you some plastics that have been designed using, rather than oil drilled out of the ground, oil that we can grow as crops. So I'll be showing you some very, very modern plastics that scientists are developing with one eye on the fact that sometime in the future, maybe not our future or your future, but maybe sort of 100, 150 years down the line, when oil starts to run out, how are we going to, still create plastic as a material? It is an amazing material. If I snap my fingers and everything in your house that was made out of plastic disappeared now, so much would be gone. Look around you, see if you can see where you are now what is made out of plastic. You'll probably find that half the things that you're looking at are made out of plastic. So it is a wonderful, versatile material. Started coming into use about 100, 150 years ago when chemists started mixing chemicals together, experimenting with oil. So it hasn't been around forever. In the history of human beings, it's quite a modern material. So it comes from oil. Plastics are being created all the time in laboratories. So at the last count, there were several thousand different types of plastic, and they've all got slightly different uses. So they're not all the same. Some are more flexible. Some are better if they get very hot. Some are used for because of their rainproof properties or their flexibility. Or so there are different uses for different plastics, but you can fit them into just two families. The first one, and this is the one that's the most used type of plastic, they're called thermoplastics, and acrylic is a thermoplastic. So when this plastic is created at a refinery, you can use this plastic again and again. This is a great thing about thermoplastics, is you can melt them down and you can recycle them. You can use them again, which means that we're using less oil. tell you more about the other family of plastics in a minute, and they can't be recycled, which is not a great thing. But there's a reason why they can't be recycled, and that's to do with their use. So all sorts of plastics around us. In your house, you will find all sorts of thermoplastics. I've got a plastic drain pipe here. This is made out of a type of plastic called high-density polyethylene, which is a bit of a mouthful. So we tend to use a lot of initials with plastic. So this would be HDPE, and it's very, very flexible. So when it's outside on your side of your house, getting filled with water, it's a drain pipe guttering. It can take a bit of a bashing in the weather, and of course it's waterproof. It's not going to rust. It's not going to rot. The only thing that might happen to this is if it's outside for a long, long time, it might start to go a little bit pale. If you've ever left plastic toys out in a garden or in direct sunlight for a long, long time, you might notice them start to bleach and get paler and paler. But that's a really nice example there. Some of the first plastics. This is a really heavy. I'd say this is about 60 years old. This is a hairdryer from just after the Second World War, and it weighs a ton. Back then, the type of plastic that was being used the most was called Bakelite, and it was invented by Mr. Baker. And he thought, well, it's almost as tough as metal, but it's a lot lighter, so that's where Bakelite came from. The only trouble was he could only make it in brown. So if you go into antique shops or junk shops and you see this funny brown-looking plastic, it might be a radio, it might be a hairdryer, it might be something else, then it's more likely to be a piece of Bakelite. So this is quite historical plastic if you see it in that brown colour. This I found outside my house one morning. Obviously, someone had been in a bit of an accident, but had driven off and left this. This was on the floor. I think it's from a BMW. I think it's that sort of front grille, and you get another one sort of on this side. But this is made out of injection molded plastic. So that would be something for you to look up. Injection molding. That's the process where how a lot of plastics are made, where liquid plastic, so plastic that's been heated up and it turns to liquid, very hot, and it's injected into molds, hollow molds in the shape of something. So it could be a hollow mold that's in the shape of a bin lid, or it could be a hollow mold that's in the shape of this grill. And then when the plastic cools down, it solidifies, and you can take the mold apart and out drops one of these. Then you put the mold back together again, and you repeat and you repeat and you repeat the process. In the old days, a grill like this would have probably been made out of metal, and if you've been in an accident, it would have dented and probably broken, and you would have to get a new one. This might look like metal, but this is chromed plastic, and the whole thing, it didn't break. It literally pinged off. These bits here are designed to clip in place, and the car probably hit something else, and it just pinged off. So it wouldn't be so expensive to replace this. If, like I said, if this was a metal grill, like in the old days, it would have been dented, and you would have had to replace the whole thing. Probably would have cost a lot more. So another little use for plastics there. Plastics sometimes need to be very, very flexible. Okay, this is designed. This is an old gas mask from the army, used by the army, and not everyone's face is the same shape. So they needed a material that when this gets put onto the face, it's flexible to fit the face, but you've got a nice seal all the way around, so no nasty air or gas can get inside. So this has been made out of a very flexible kind of rubberized material. So that's another example there. So if thermoplastics can be melted down and used again, how is the second family different? Well, they're called thermoset plastics. And thermoset plastics, once they are created in the factory, they cannot be affected by heat. They cannot be recycled. They cannot be melted down. And what they're used for is any situation where you get extremely hot temperatures and you don't want your plastic to start melting and catching light, because as you know, any plastic that catches light is going to burn really, really well because of obviously being in large part made out of oil. So I've got here an extension lead. So all of your plugs at home, so all of your electrical plugs like that, all of your sockets on the walls, anything electrical, this is made out of thermoset plastic. So that if it does get hot, and sometimes electricity can overload and you can get a surge, you don't want this catching light. If any of you have got a microwave oven at home and you cook any microwave meals in there, they come in trays like this. Can you imagine if this tray was made out of thermoplastic, not thermoset? You put this tray with your curry in there into the microwave and press go, the whole thing would just melt. So this is thermoset plastic. This will not melt, so that your meal will heat up. And if you open up a microwave oven, there's usually a round dish that rotates very slowly. If you take that round dish away, there's usually a little round plastic ring on wheels. Now that will be made out of thermoset plastic as well. So any time that plastic gets really, really hot, it will be made out of thermoset plastic. But like I said, the downside is it cannot be recycled. So what we do with it to get rid of it, we have to bury it in landfill sites. So it might be an old quarry, or it might be an old mine, and basically that fills up with things that we cannot recycle. And then eventually it will have rubble and stone put over the top of it, and then soil, and then grass, and then trees. I think I've told you the tale about the old rubbish dump that I was taken to as a very young child one night when my dad was doing a tip run in the 1970s, that long ago. And I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm doing a tip run." And I said, "What's a tip run?" And he said, "Well, we're going to the rubbish tip." "What's a rubbish tip, Dad?" "Get in the car and I'll show you." And everything in Exeter back then, all rubbish was just put on one pile. No, there's no recycling, nothing like we do today. And it was all one pile. Now that rubbish dump, that rubbish tip, is now a park because it was covered over in grass and what have you. They planted lots of nice trees. It looks lovely. It looks really nice. But if you dug 10 feet down, you'd find all of the rubbish from Exeter from the 1970s and the 1980s. So we can't get rid of this stuff. We can't get rid of it. I did talk about the fact that oil one day eventually is going to run out. Not exactly at the same time, but we do need to start looking at replacements. I have got some cutlery here, and I've got a cup, a drinking cup. Get that piece off. That is made out of bamboo. So that was grown, and then that material was used to make that cup. And this cutlery, the oil to make these plastic spoons and forks and so on, came from cornstarch. So that's a crop. So you grow corn and you use the oil from that crop to make all of these. So they're recyclable and they were grown, the oil was grown. And the only downside of that is that most crops are grown for food for people to eat. And in some countries, basically you need all of your crops to feed people, and it's not a good idea to have crops that are there for other things. So it might have to be done carefully, as long as people are getting fed first, and then we can start making things out of cornstarch and plastic. But that's one. I've got bin bags here, again, that are made from starch, and these are biodegradable, so they would, they would degrade. If you left a piece of plastic in a field, it would still be there 200, 300, 400 years later. Yeah, it doesn't degrade. So you've either got to recycle it or you've either got to bury it. Okay. And one of my favourites, this old football that's been with me for a long, long time. When I was really young, footballs were leather, and they would, if it was a rainy, wet day, they would get heavier and heavier and heavier, and you'd try and head them and knock yourself out. And then this football came along. This has got a polyurethane plastic coating. So suddenly, we were playing with a football that didn't get soaked with water, didn't start weighing a ton. You could still head it and kick it. And that was because the water was not going in, because it had this plastic coating. is everywhere. It's an amazingly useful material. Uh, the downside is what we do with it after we've finished with it. And if you've ever watched programs by Sir David Attenborough, he did an amazing program where a camera crew went to a tiny little Pacific island called Henderson Island. No one lives on there. It's about the size of if you walked around the Swanmead playing field, it's about that size. It's got some birds on it and some rabbits and things like that. But because it's in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, all of the rubbish, all of the plastic that's thrown into the Pacific Ocean, because of the currents, they tend to spiral all the way to the middle. So the poor beaches of Henderson Island are covered in plastic junk, and that's wrong. We really need to do something about that. So we need to think very carefully. And your generation are probably the most knowledgeable about recycling and about what we do with our waste. Like I said, when I was a little kid, all of our rubbish just went on one rubbish tip and then it was covered over. Recycling is a relatively new thing, and being careful about what we do with things after we finish with them is relatively new. And I think it's a really good thing, because we've only got one planet, so we need to look after it very carefully. So that's a little bit about plastic. See if you can look around your house and see if you can work out what plastics you've got. Maybe do some research if you want to. You could even start doing some sketches for your clock. But the most important thing is to find out about the Memphis Design Group. Okay, look them up. Look at the sort of colours and the styles that they use, and then you've got enough information to maybe start thinking about a clock. Okay. Stay safe, everyone. Bye bye.